Okay, welcome back to our discussion on Go web applications. So in this section, in this video, in this unit, I want to discuss the idea of routing. Okay, so we have been using the servmux that comes with Go, right? And we've been using that to be our multiplexer. So whenever the web server gets a URL, it hands that URL off to the multiplexer, and then the multiplexer simply looks up in its map what is the corresponding handler. Now, I want us to transition to a third-party multiplexer, okay, aka, in other words, it is also called a router. So MUX is our router, okay. So we want to use a third-party router that gives us a bit more flexibility. You can do the same things. You can do the same thing in Go. However, you will need to write a lot more code. So when it comes to routing, people tend to use a third-party router. And so we'll do the same. Okay, so because we are using a third-party router, it gives me the opportunity to talk about the idea of REST. Okay, what is a REST API? RESTful routing. I have provided you with some links on the site where you can look up the idea of REST. Of course, in your earlier web development course, you would have learned about GET, you would have learned about POST, you would have learned about patch, about put, about delete. Okay, so those are in essence the commands that we tend to use when it comes to RESTful routing. Okay, so to emphasize this point, I will make a few changes to our handlers, okay, to our routes. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to change the names. So I'm going to call this one quote / create. And then I'm going to create another one. Okay, remember this one was when we posted. So I'm going to call that one also create. Okay. And we're going to have app.home, app.create quote form, app.create quote, good. And then I will call this one, let me get rid of this one. Okay. All right, so all I want to do is to have this one where we show a single quote. Okay, and so that will be, notice I'm using quote for everything. And the one thing that changes is the identifier. Okay, and I'm going to call this one show quote. Okay, so there's a few cosmetic changes. Let's save this. We'll come back here. And let's go to our handler. Okay. So for the home handler, I want us to, let me get this. I'm going to delete the home handler. Okay. Okay. And I will make this handler be the home handler. Remember, this one is the one that shows all the quotes. Okay, so I'm going to make that be the home handler. And then I'm going to put that piece of code there where we check to see if it's root. Okay, and so that is my home handler. All right, so that doesn't seem like a major change. So let me, oh, okay. So this is called show quote. Okay, I changed the name. Okay, so we have show quote. We have the home handler. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna move the home handler and put it up at the top. Okay, so let me just cut this. Okay, and I'm gonna put that at the top. Okay, so I'm just doing a bit of cosmetic changes, nothing major. Okay, so I have my home handler, which will display all the quotes. I have my create quote form, which um, creates or pulls up the form. And then I have my create quote, which actually is responsible for storing, uh, getting the data from the form, uh, creating a SQL statement, or calling the insert statement, and then specifying that the record was updated. All right, great. So I have not really done much. Okay, so I need to make one change though, because let me come back to routes. Okay, and so let me walk you through the process of now using creating a router. No, we're not going to use new serve mux. Okay, so that goes. Instead, we will create a variable named mux, and we'll say that it's a new path that new router. Okay, so path is the name of our third-party library. All right, so of course I need to install that third-party library. So go get github.com/bmi ZERANY. Okay, so that's this one right here. Okay, now there are many routers that are available for Go. Path is one of the easier ones to use. It's very straightforward. Um, the most popular one is Gorilla Mux. Okay, it's huge. It has so much functionality, but we don't need all of that for this simple app. So we will use Path. Okay, and so you install it here. Keep in mind, all of these things are open source, so you can just read the code. Okay, so all the code is right there for you, how they implemented it. Okay, so let's /path. Okay. Okay, good. So it has been added, and then now I should be able to, if I save this, Control S, it automatically installs it for me. Okay, if not, you will have to manually type this out. github.com, right? BMI Zerani /path. Okay, so we're using our third-party router. Okay. A third-party router. Right? And by now you should all know what a router is. Right? A multiplexer. Okay. All right. It has many routes, but ultimately it has to choose one. Okay. But we can no longer do this because this is not the way how path works. Okay. So we have to change our code a bit, because it tells us if we want to use path, we have to specify the method. Okay, Okay, so this is a get method because when you type /, you're saying get me the home page. And so we will say mux that get. Okay, so the get is simply one of the methods that we talk about when we say rest. Okay, so we have get and post. All right, those are the two most common. Okay, now unfortunately, because I no longer have handler func, okay, so all of this handler func has to go. Handler func, okay, so remember handler func was responsible for making our functions become something that could serve HTTP, that could listen to HTTP, that could reply to HTTP. But we've taken away that handler func. So app.home is just a function, right? Just a function. So to put back that functionality, we simply say HTTP dot handler func. Okay, and then we wrap the route, the handler. Okay, okay. So I'll just copy this, and I'll do the same here. V. Okay. So it's just one of those trade-offs we have to make when we use a third-party tool. Okay, the third-party tool will help us, but at the end of the day, we have to make some concessions. Okay, so when I want to create a form, that will be a get. Okay, sorry, down here. Okay, so this is a get. Okay, so when we see get, okay, when we ask for the form, okay, that's a get request. Okay, now look at what I do. I have two URLs that are the same, quote create, quote create. And so if you recall in the past, we had to create two separate URLs. One to get the one to show the form, to display the form, and then the other one to actually process the form. Okay? But now we don't have to do that. We can use the same URL, and all we have to do is to change the method to post. Okay? So what will happen when you pull up the form and you hit submit, then it will know that it's a post, and so it will know to run this one. Okay? Okay. And this will be a get, all right? Because you're asking for a single quote, so it's a get. And here, this is also a get because you want to get some resource. Okay. Okay. And so that's pretty much it. All right. So what I want to do now, okay, so let me say go mod tidy. Okay, Control L. Okay. So we have now fixed our routes. We are using a third-party router. And so we are registering each of our routes with that router. Okay. And of course, we then register the middleware that we did the last time. So nothing really changes here. It's just the way we write the URLs. Now, there's one thing you must keep in mind. Path will match the URL based on the pattern it sees. Okay. So for example, if it has quote create, and then for example it has quote ID, okay, If I were to put this one above the post, then when it's searching, it would basically say, oh, okay, this here is better than, or is earlier than this one. Okay, and so it would execute that one. So what you want to do, you want to make sure that when you list your URLs, you go from specific to general. Okay, now this is specific, it's /. This is specific, quote create. This is specific, quote create. But this is general. Why general? Because if you recall, our ID could be anything. Could be 1, could be 11, could be 12. So you want to put all the specific URLs first, followed by the general ones, the ones that have wildcards. Okay? Because if it sees, if you put this first and you type /quote /create, it will say, oh, okay, well, you have quote and you have this thing here, right? So maybe that's the wildcard, so maybe that's the create. So the bottom line is specific, then general, okay? Because it's doing pattern matching. Okay, so we're good with this, okay? Nothing much to do here. So we're done. Now let's get to the gist of REST API. So notice I don't have to write a lot of unique URLs. Quote create can work both for get and for post. And this comes in very handy when you're creating forms. So if you have like a login form, instead of having to create a URL that says show the form and a URL to process the form, you just create one URL name, right? And then you just call get or post. And the router will know which one to call. So it saves us time and it makes our code easier to read. Okay, so that's RESTful routing. And the thing is, it's just a common standard where most applications that you use, it's following a RESTful approach. Okay, it's following a RESTful approach. Now, in the past, you remember we had to do things like a question mark, ID equal 5. We don't have to do that anymore. With REST, we follow the REST pattern, which is simply whatever you need, / and then the number 5. Okay, which is much easier. Okay. All right, so that's it. Let's move on to our handlers. So there's a few things we don't need to do anymore in some of our handlers, and I'll show you the first one that we don't need to worry about anymore. If I go up here to my, where are you? Here, home. Do you remember we had to check to see if the user entered only the /? And if they didn't, we would have this message. But I don't need this anymore because I have told it that we're looking for /, only /. So it takes care of that for us. It will only match / because I remember what I said, specific. So it will only match /. Now another important thing is, if I come down to create quote, I no longer need to check the method if it's post, because it will only be called with post. Create quote is only being called on the post method. So I no longer need to check, because the only way this will be called is if I am posting. Okay, So it does cut down on a bit of the code. Okay, so we still have a few more changes to make. So if we go to show quote, remember we had a ID. What I have to do now is actually put colon ID. Okay, I put colon ID. Let's save that. And so now what I need to make sure is when I redirect, okay, where am I redirecting to? Oh, okay, that's up here. Where are we redirecting? Where create quotes? Okay, create quotes. Yes, right here. Okay, so this is where I'm redirecting. Okay, remember when we create a quote, we redirect and we show the quote. So my URL doesn't have to be this complicated anymore. Okay, it could simply be this / quote / modulus D, and we're done. Okay, that's it. No more question marks, no more equal sign, just / quote / and the number of the quotation ID. Okay, so that's it. Let's give this a run to see if it actually works. Okay. Whenever you make changes, you gotta make sure you haven't broken anything. Oh, okay. Okay. So the moment of truth is to localhost. Okay, right? So our home handler gives us all the codes. And so if I say / quote / create, okay. So let's create this. Create a quote. Say life. Let's say life is love. Love is life. Uh-oh. Quote add. Okay, quote add. I remember that. That used to be a URL. Yeah, that used to be somewhere here. It would be the one that we called when we wanted to store or save the form or save the data into the database. But we changed that to create quote. Okay. So that's / quote / create. Okay. So if I go to my HTML, that would be quotes front page. Yeah, yes, right here. Okay. So when we hit submit, our form is not going to this anymore. Our form should go to quote / create method post. Stop this. Okay. So you always need to be mindful of your code. Okay. Okay. So let me save this. And let's see if that resolves our issue. Okay. Let's close this. Let's open again. Code box. Okay. Let's create a new one. Success maybe. Success is intentional. If you want success, you get success. Not if you want, no. If you believe you want success, you'll get success. Okay, so it now works. Okay, what I did in the last lesson, I simply had text, but I decided to write a little template. Okay, so if you look in here, you'll see a page called quote page. Okay, very simple template um, with quote, body, author, close, and then I went to templates, and then I added another field, quote, okay? Because I call quote in my handler. Okay, so you'll notice that I called quote here. Okay, all right. Of course, quote is just a single quote, and if you compare that to the one we call in home, which is quotes, which is a pointer, a list of pointers to quotes. Okay, so again, nothing much there. Okay, so believe it or not, well, we could try one more thing. Let's see if, let's just do curl. Let's do a post, but we're gonna write the post on localhost, okay, / actually colon 4000 / quote / 21. Okay, and notice it is telling us not allowed, right? Because if you use this URL, you can only do a get, right? You can only do a get. So it means it works, right? Because remember, we are saying that if we're going to use, where are we? Here. If we're going to use this URL, this pattern, okay, it's a get. It's a get. So the router is sort of enforcing the proper method call, get, post. Now, get and post are the most two common, but when you build an API, you will need to update, for example, your entries, and so that's where we use the put. Okay. Then of course there is delete. There is patch. Okay. So there's quite a few of them. Okay. So with that in mind, that brings us to the end of this lesson. So again, it's rather straightforward. All we're doing now basically is adding features. Okay, so this is RESTful routing. Again, the idea is you specify the method, and this means that we can simplify how our URLs look, how our routes look. We don't have to come up with weird URLs. We can use the same URL, quote, create, but the router will do the hard work of knowing which one to call. Okay. Okay. And so that's it. That's routers. That's adding a third-party router to our um, web application. Right? So nothing difficult. Again, there are many to choose from, and each comes with its own advantages and disadvantages. And so, as a web developer, you will have to sit down, read documentation, and ask yourself, what are the requirements of my web application, and which router gives me the features that I require. Now, again, if it's just a simple web application that has um, maybe just two routes, right? Let's say you want to um, who was it? It's I think it's Kimberly's group. Yeah, where you simply want to do a registration, right? You pull up the page, you register. Okay? That's simple. Most web applications are simple. And so most web applications do not really need a third-party router. ServeMux for 85–90% of the time will work. Okay, but if you need to implement a standard or you're told you must implement a RESTful API, then yes, you just go ahead and grab a third-party package. All right. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's always judging. It's always deciding, weighing the advantages and the disadvantages to determine if you should go the third-party route. All right. Okay. I'll see you in the next lesson where we will look at creating sessions. I'll see you then.